Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering current events on your Thursday morning rise and shine. And this morning here, we're looking at the topic, the current tidings out of the East. And I'm looking at some developments with nuclear and business. So what's going on over there in the East? Just a little snippet, not too much. We're going to be looking at this morning here and how this plays out and trying to understand how this plays out in the end times. So welcome again to our live talk program. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and you're ready to take on today, this day that the Lord has given you, life. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for your word. I thank you for the guidance that you give, and I pray, Lord, that you may bless my mind as I try to communicate some of these thoughts, dear Lord, and what's going on in the world. May you bless me and bless those who are listening for Christ's sake. Amen. So we're looking at here this topic, the current tidings out of the East, and we're particularly two things I'm going to talk about: business and nuclear. And so some of the stuff I'm going to talk about here is I have to summarize it. Sometimes some of these articles I read, one of the articles I was reading was from New York Times and kind of a bit too long. So I decided to just summarize some thoughts that I get here and just to have this kind of monologue here with you this morning, and I'll probably open up some discussions as to what's going on over there in the East and how it affects prophecy or things to come to pass as foretold in the Bible, trying to understand what's happening here. So I'm going to start off by reading Daniel chapter 11, verse 45. Daniel 11, verse 45 or 44. And it says, "But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many." All right, so here's this text here that tells us about something that will be happening in the end, and that tidings from a certain geographical location, messages, tidings, things coming out of the north and the east. So my particular view here is what's developing in the east. And what I'm looking at again is nuclear and business, not so much with the gospel, but this is where we want to look at. Now, this is important in my mind because if you remember the story of this is again we just read from Daniel, and if you remember the story of Daniel, that Daniel came into being or into existence. The story of Daniel comes in a time when Israel was being taken captive into Babylon. So Israel was going to be conquered as a nation, and they were going to be taken captive into Babylon. And at the time, Israel was waning in power. It was not the great empire that Solomon and David had established, and Moses and Joshua and so forth. And it was going to be waning in power. And as it was waning in power, there was one particular interesting issue that kept on coming up, this issue of worship. So this issue of worship kept on coming up. And what came up with the issue of worship was that the Babylonians, the Babylonian worship system with their gods and their paganism was an attraction, one of the main attraction of the Jews. And they were attracted to this type of paganism. They were attracted to Assyrian worship first, and then after they were attracted to Assyrian worship, they were attracted to the Babylonian worship, or probably all in the same breath, with Moloch and various different Chemosh and various different gods. And interestingly enough, the northern tribes, which was called Israel, and separately from the southern tribes, which were called Judah, the northern tribes got taken captive first. The first 10 tribes that got taken captive were taken captive by the Assyrians. And if you notice, what preceded the captivity of Israel was the fascination that they had with the pagan gods. So they were taken captive religiously and mentally before they were physically taken captive. They were destroyed by paganism. So that's important to note, and it's the main point of view that I'm going towards. The spiritual captivity was first executed by themselves. They're the one that did it. It was done to them by themselves. It was an internal issue. And after they were taken captive spiritually, or mentally, or socially, or however you want to call it, but spiritually, with true worship, then their captivity came next physically. So the Assyrians first, they were up first. Then after that, the Babylonians. As you're familiar, I think it's Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel chapter 8, I think it is. Or somewhere in between there, after there. You read that the Babylonians were the Egyptian, the Israelis, or the Jews, the southern tribe now, at the time of Ezekiel, they were interested and fascinated with the pagan gods from the Babylonian systems, other systems, but primarily the Babylonians. And this fascination led them down a path that ultimately ended in their being taken physical captive. So the spiritual captivity came first. So they loved the Babylonian gods, and next you know, their leader was a Babylonian leader. So that's kind of thing is very important. One has to understand that, because that's how one is led captive. You have to be mentally enslaved for the most part. I guess you can be kidnapped, but if you're kidnapped and you're not mentally enslaved, any opportunity you get, you're going to try to break loose. But how does a people submit to, say, slavery physically? It's because they're mentally enslaved. The mind is messed up. So this philosophy, this concept is rock solid throughout the Old Testament. If you read Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, you find, and in the prophets, you find this narrative being played out. Whatever God that you submit to, that becomes your God. Whatever it is, it could be material possession, it could be a God that you bow to. Because the philosophy of those who created the God, or the God himself, will become your philosophy because you're mentally worshiping that God. So with that in mind, when I read now, what I just read in Daniel 11 verse 42, one of the main things that jump out of me is this concept of tiding from the north and the east. And so for the most part, I'm looking at the east. The north plays a significant role, because a people that is enslaved mentally or spiritually will do whatever the master tell them to do. They'll go along mentally with the enslavement. And so I'm fascinated as to what's going on in the East. Now, why? You might think, why would I be fascinated with that other than this text? Because this text didn't give me all of that, somebody was saying. Because remember, when I'm reading a text like this, I'm reading it in the context of what's happening to Daniel himself. His story becomes my fascination when it comes on to this type of text. The intriguing story of this individual here, this character. Now, what it is that, as I say, the Jews went from worshiping the Babylonian gods to becoming captive to the Babylonians. What we've seen developing amongst us, it was predicted it would happen, but now we're living, seeing it happening. We're in the United States and many of the Western countries, what are classified as Western Europe and America. We have this fascination where the Christians, those who once went to church, who are European descent, they're primarily moving away from Christianity, Protestantism primarily, and they're moving, many of them, to Eastern mysticism. Also, you find that they're moving not only to Eastern mysticism, but you find even the Protestant churches, which is more alarming to me, is moving towards Eastern mysticism, while worshiping the true God, while worshiping God and touting the Bible. So you find the increase in yoga, which would be, again, an Eastern practice, and on the interest in Hindu gurus and in various other type of paganism. So this is what's happening, and this is happening in all denomination. It doesn't matter if it's Baptist, Methodist, Seventh Adventist. All denomination is being plagued by this thing, where the Christian principles and concepts are being replaced by Eastern practices. So when people become fascinated by a new God, it changes who they are, because the God and the people that worship that God, they become like, and they become subservient to that God. And this is not mean anything new, but I guess you could more show it in the realms of secular media and in the realm of like secular music, like the Beatles and all those people, that their fascination with paganism and Eastern religions. So you can see that, but today you see a lot of Americans are fascinated with Buddhism, fascinated with Hinduism, and all the various different isms that comes out of the East. And so normally that precedes physical captivity or loss of physical dominance, because you stopped believing in what made you who you are. And this is what happened in Israel. Israel stopped believing in who made them what they are. They stopped believing in the God of David and Solomon and Isaac and Jacob and Abraham. They started believing in the gods of the East, and they became captive to the people of the East. This is what I believe will precipitate. This is not to be the merger, because normally when people interpret these type of texts, they're dealing with only war, and they can't see how they either deal with it where they say Daniel 11, and the next text I'm going to read, Revelation 16. People normally see it as only spiritual or only war. I see them as both, and probably one of the few people who interpret these things as both, because I see the cross section, because it was the same thing in Israel. As a matter of fact, you have to interpret the Bible with the Bible. You can't interpret it with your hopes and dreams for your nation. Well, let's just simply interpret the Bible with what the Bible says. The narrative of the Bible is that the spiritual always connected with war. That's the whole Bible. Somebody said, but but not in the New Testament. Well, you probably fell asleep when you were reading the New Testament. You never finished it then, because evil Christ preaching ended up in war. It ended up with the murder of Christ, and then the murder of every single disciple of Christ except John, and even he was locked up for life. He got a life imprisonment. And there was just persecution and destruction that continued after that, both for the Christian and for the Jews. The whole narrative of the Bible is war, but also is spiritual. But when we normally interpret prophecy, we try to make it only war or only spiritual. But it's always both. And I sometimes baffled why people find it so hard to understand that Daniel and Revelation is describing two things, because that's all you get in Daniel and Revelation. It's a kingdom fight. It's an empire fight. So I'm going to read Daniel 11, this big text that people only interpret one way or the other. I look at it as two things happening at the same time. I don't separate them out, because that's the story of the world, war and religion. As a matter of fact, I throw this in there. People always say, oh, religion caused so much problem. It's just human being fight, and they're philosophical at the same time. And they try to philosophize their fights, and they say, oh, but this warrior is because of this God, or this warrior is because of that God. But they're fighting either way. So Daniel 11 verse 40 through 41 says, and he shall enter into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So these are Bible areas in the world that are significant to our backdrop of understanding the Bible and the world events. Verse 42, and he shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. Pardon me here. So land of Egypt shall not escape, but he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. And the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly to make away many. So this is where that war narrative comes in. And he shall plant his tabernacles of his palaces between the seas, plural, and glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. All right, so that's that text that I'm not going to try to go through and explain all what that text is saying. I have other presentations on that, but I'm just focusing here on that tie out of the east. Now I'm going to read now for you Revelation 16, verse 12 through 16. Notice here again it says, and the sixth angel, Revelation 16 verse 12 onwards, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the waters thereof was dried up, that the kings of the east might be, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared, right? So before I keep reading there, this I'll explain a little bit. Notice here, the vials were poured out in the great river Euphrates. River Euphrates is recognized as being the source of, I guess, water. I could say that straightforward without trying to explain no more. Water to feed Babylon. Babylon, as you know, was divided in 3 provinces. Lydia, I think, Babylonia, Egyptia. Okay, I think I got that right. So Lydia, Babylonia, and Egyptia, 3 provinces. But the main center, which was Babylon itself, the city, was kept fed by water, by primarily the river Euphrates. And so if you remember the story, the kings of the east were the Medes and the Persians. When they came, the Darius the Mede, to attack Babylon, the city, they came, kings plural, so that's where the way of the kings standing out to the east. They come from the east. They come in from Iran, in our modern day vernacular. And they came and they attacked Babylon, but they came up with this ingenious plan that what they have to do is cut off its source, right? Because it's fed. And if it's fed and you can cut off the water, you can divert the water, you can basically attack it because it's going to be weakened. And the source of the water is also the way to attack it, the channel. So that's important. That is just like so significant that one can overlook what's going on there. So Babylon itself is a significant entity, so to speak, in the end time, because the Bible referred to Babylon as being the main rebellion against God, right? So it's being attacked, just like the Egyptian, the Medes and the Persian attack it. So when you put your thinking caps here with me, because this is straightforward, but just have to explain it so that I don't miss anything for this hour. So Babylon, it's that false union, the false trinity against God, so to speak, in the last days. And the entity that rises up against God's people and is working to do things to corrupt the earth is Babylon. But yet somehow something happened where the kings out of the east comes and attack Babylon to destroy it. But how they attack it primarily is by cutting off its water source. And if you cut water source of Babylon, then Babylon has no water. But also the bed of that water source become the path where the soldiers can go up and attack it. And if you catch that significance for the last days, because when we talk about a people being captive by, what they worship, right? Normally the mindset become messed up, and then whatever mess up their mindset become their God. So if the kings of the east cut off the source, the flow, then this basically cripples Babylon. Now think about that, and that's why I say the topic again is the current tidings out of the east, and I'm looking at nuclear and business, because as you know, what keeps the West, the West going more and more significantly is that flow of goods and stuff like that out of the east. And so whatever is going on, more and more. I remember a few years ago, I'll give you an example. There was a tsunami. I think it was a tsunami in Japan, yeah, and it destroyed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. And I remember that that was significant. That's massive in itself. But I remember because of the damage that was done to that area, it was the area that they produced red paint. And although red paint might be one particular product that is just a product, but it was fascinating that almost all the red paint in the world was produced in that area in Japan, and the supply of red paint all of a sudden dried up, and anything that was being produced with red paint stopped. And I was like, wow, that was fascinating because you can't imagine the amount of goods and services that flow and feed the West coming right out of there. So any tiding out of that area will have significant impact on the sustainability and the viability of the West, of the East, sorry. And this is why I find this fascinating, because again, it's the kings come and they attack. Revelation 17, or even Daniel say, he shall go with great fury, but it shall come to his end, and none shall help him. But if you look at this, you see here that the supply can be cut off because the supply is coming from a certain area. And today we have it where not only it's a supply of goods, it's a supply of money. A lot of the loans that the Western empires are dependent upon are coming out of China and other various Western countries. So the feeding, whatever feeds it, can get cut off. And primarily I say it, I'm talking about the United States of America, because that's where America is concerned with. So anything stock market wise, anything that happened in China or places like that troubles America very much. So some of this, you might say, well, what does it have to do with per se the gospel? Well, my interpretation, because remember, I just interpret them both as happening at the same time. Because remember, the East also is the primary place where there's not been any real significant gospel movement throughout history in any significant way. From the time of Noah until now, we have no recorded history of even anything significant. Paul said he preached the gospel everywhere. We believe that, but there's still no significant record of the churches that were established in the East. We keep that in mind. There's been, but there is not in a significant way. So we continue reading. So I'm saying that to finish the thought. So then I believe that both are connected. Because remember, I'll give you an example again. There's just so much in my head. I'm just trying to get out it. Just think about when Babylon fell. If you remember the story of Daniel, where was Daniel physically when Babylon fell? Where did they call him from to interpret the writing on the wall that Babylon was about to go out? He was actually physically in the East. He was in Medes and the Persian. He was on the river of Kibar, I think it is, in a city, Shushan, I think it was, a citadel. So he was actually physically where was going to be the next rise. And so we don't know if he was there teaching prophecy. We don't know what he was physically there doing, or we just doing business. Because remember, there's a prophecy that is stated. I can't remember. I should have pulled it, but I can't remember. I think it was Ezekiel or Jeremiah that predicted way before the Medes and the Persian even attacked Babylon, that the Lord was going to work through the general to attack Babylon and name him by name, which was significant. The prophet not only say who was going to do it, he said, this is the person, this is the name of the person. So we don't know if Daniel was there actually telling him, not telling him how he's going to do it, but telling him, you are up next and you are going to do this. So significant. So when you see what's going on, when the Bible said, "Tie down to the east and the way of the king of the east," you could see Daniel the prophet like handwriting on the wall. But again, you can see that that was the next place that the gospel was going to have significant results. Not only myself, I've heard other people believe that that's going to be the last area for gods to do a massive reaping, because that's the area that really hasn't been touched in any significant way with a revival. Europe has had this revival. I don't know about the south part of Africa, but the north part, Middle East, America, South America, certainly have heard a lot of the gospel. But the major part, which is most of the world population is located, is in that area. At least that's where my understanding is. So the sixth angel, I'll read it again for you. The sixth angel poured his vial upon the great river Euphrates. River Euphrates is a feed Babylon. The waters thereof was dried up, and the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw the three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. So when this is happening, spiritualism will take a significant hold. And I'll read something from Andrew White's writing to tie all of this up. So spiritualism will take a particular hold. We know spiritualism always came from the east and somewhat from the north. And somebody said, well, why you say north? Because Babylon was east of Israel. When they would describe Babylon and the Assyrians, they would describe them as coming from the north and east. The reason why, because although Babylon was physically to the east of Jerusalem, somehow because of the mountains, they would go north, then come back south to attack Israel. They kind of go around. They wouldn't go straight east, or west. You get that? So, but they were coming literally east, north. That is out to the east, out to the north. So when Israel would be attacked, it would be attacked technically, I guess, from the east, but they're coming north down upon them and attack them from that direction. So I think you can understand that. You look at the history of Israel, you will see it's saying that Babylon will come from the north, or Assyrians come from the east, or so forth. But it's the same concept. You can study that out yourself. So notice here that this three unclean spirit comes. They're like frogs. The frog represent in the Old Testament when Moses was leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, and the false prophets, or the necromancers, or the witch doctors, they were able to duplicate by illusion each of the plagues that Moses did up to the time of the frogs. After the frogs, they were not able to duplicate anything else that Moses did, because you can't duplicate a hailstorm, I think it was, or whatever it was that came after. So significant, they were able to duplicate. So the frogs represent the limit of spiritualism. Spiritualism is able to do miracles, so to speak, or illusions, but there's a certain point where God limits them. And so spiritualism, basically, is being said, will be a big significant factor in the last days I believe, in the Western empires. And we're seeing this in our very eyes. If you look at the TV, all the various different media, all this is just a lot of dark witchcraft, devil worship stuff, a lot of seance, a lot of people who are mediums, talking to people on the other side, talking to the dead, getting contact with fallen angels. This is what's going on right now in the West. So we see that this is being fulfilled, that in the Western countries, or I would just say European countries, and those that are connected to her, there's a significant rejection of Christianity and this embracing of paganism, or what we call heathenism or spiritualism. And this is happening in all the various different institutions that constitute Babylon, and or whether it be Christian or secular or whatever. And even I would say in paganism, because one thing I've been watching is the increased activity of witch, wizard, and people who do Santeria, people who do palm reading. All these people, they have more business, because when people leave the church, they go to paganism. They don't stop being worshippers. They just start worshiping the devil. So this is what we see happening. So notice here that there's three unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, paganism itself going to increase with spiritualism. They're going to have an increase, and we see that. As I say, the yogis and the various different people, they're doing better business, but primarily in the West, a lot of people in the West are becoming yogis themselves, under the mouth of the beast and under the mouth of false prophets. In the churches, we'll talk about it in a second. For they are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth to the kings of the earth and the whole world, to gather them to the battle of the great day of God Almighty. So we see that this idea here of a battle is coming up. And so there's a battle. There's going to be significant issue. So we notice that the narrative that is going on is not just what coming out of the east, business-wise, but the spiritual side is there, and also the nuclear war side is there. All this is the tidings coming out of the east. Unless, as I say, you're on a rock and you have been paying attention. Verse 15 says, "Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garment, lest he walk naked and they sees shame." So notice the Bible tells you that, hey, look, when you see this, the second coming is not far. So that's why I particularly studied this. And if you study it, I'd like to hear how you parse this text, because this text is so significant, because it tells you that you have to have your robe. You have to robe up, and we get that robe from Jesus, because we're getting closer. And it's one thing to say, well, I can live to see a certain age. It's another thing to say, all that can get cut off. Because when Christ comes, it doesn't matter what age you are, what situation you're in, you either have your robe on or you don't. Most actually, the robe represents Christ's righteousness. And verse 16, and he gathered them together in a place called, in the Hebrew tongue, Armageddon, for war, because it's going to be significant war. And we know this is spiritual because, again, the text is talking about you better get your robe on if you're a Christian. Those who don't have the robe on will be filled with devils and demons, and they'll be prepared for war. But yet the kings of the east is going to sack Babylon by cutting off its funding, and so forth, cutting off its source. Significant. Harmony again. So now I'm going to read for you the statement here, and from Ellen G. White here, from Great Controversy, page 588. I think I read this on Tuesday. And then I'm going to read that article and then talk about some of the business stuff for the rest of the half here. This is Great Controversy, page 588, paragraph 1 and 2. Through the two great errors, the immortality of the soul and Sunday sacredness, Satan will bring the people under his deceptions. While the former lay the foundation of spiritualism, the latter create a bond of sympathy with Rome. The Protestants of the United States will be foremost in stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They will reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power. Under the influence of this threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling the rights of conscience. As spiritualism more closely imitates the nominal Christianity of today, it has greater power to deceive and ensnare. Satan itself is converted after the modern order of things. He will appear in the character of an angel of light. Through the agency of spiritualism, miracles will be wrought, the sick will be healed, and many undeniable wonders will be performed. And as the spirits will profess faith in the Bible and manifest respect for the institutions of the church, their work will be accepted as a manifestation of divine power. So if you look at that statement there, you read it again, you will notice, read it in your own time, and then read Revelation 16 verse 12 through 16. You just gotta like read those two paragraphs and read that section of Revelation 16 to 16. And you can hear the clear correlation. Notice it's under the spiritualism, which will represent the dragon power, just straight devil worship. Then Protestantism, and then the Catholicism. She says, what will combine the three and create to be, my understanding of Babylon, is that threefold union. But she says, who makes this happen is the Protestants of America. It's Protestants of America bridge that gap. But ultimately, to bridge that gap, persecution will break out. Because to bridge that gap is the ultimate gap. I remember listening to this lady called Shirley MacLaine a few years back in an interview, and she was talking about when she travels the world and interact with the various different religious groups, ancient religious groups. What she find the commonality with all of them, when she basically crack the puzzle that is stated here, she says she realized that what they have all in common is this one thing, and that is that when a person dies, they keep on living. Their soul never dies, their souls are eternal, and they move on in another state. And so, no matter where she goes, she's able to have the same religious experience, because what one commonality that she finds is that in all pagan religion, the soul never dies. And so you can talk to dead people and talk to departed loved ones. That's what she's saying. So when you think about that, that's why the statement is so significant. But what bridged the gap, because there's a great abyss and a gulf that separate paganism, Christianity, and Catholicism, is going to be the Protestants of the United States. They're going to figure out how to bridge, use the Sunday sacredness to grasp the hand of Catholicism and say, look, we disagree with you on about everything, but we agree with you on one thing, which day to go to church, and we'll just unite on that. And then they go to paganism and they say, we disagree with you about everything, heathen worship or spiritualism, but there's one thing we agree with you, talking to dead people. So we can have, say, a seance and connect with those people in heaven. We can just call it heaven. And so what you say will happen now is that the pagans will start to act more Christian and say, yeah, we believe in the institutions of the church. And then you have a union right there. And the Catholics most actually already have the connectivity beyond Saturday and Sunday. You know, they agree on abortion. They agree that you should take over the government. And boom, there you have it. 3-4 union. Babylon formed. And we see it forming right now in a more serious way. They've been doing ecumenicalism for years. The Pope always have experiences where he brings animists and various witch doctors and all these things to pray at the Vatican. But it does not really work. What we believe that will make this really get on fire, we've been seeing various different Protestant leaders try to make it happen, is when that click and they realize, wait a minute, we can't just agree on this. And we can just have this experience where we talk to dead people and we worship on Sunday. And remember, the pagans have that because sun worship is one of the other basis of paganism. So when you look at this again, Revelation 16, it says, 6 angels shall pour his vial, and the great Euphrates, and whatever feeds the system now from the east attacks it. But also, the east, I believe, is going to be a significant place where all of this type of stuff becomes significant. So anyhow, I promise you, there's more I can say here on that. I might say it later. Let me read this little quick article here for you. Because remember, we're talking about what's happening in the East. Why, when all this is going on, remember, so all this is going on, I'll say one more because I want to tie this up properly and I'm running out of time. Don't have a lot of time here. It's only an hour. So look at this with me here also. If you remember what happened when Babylon fell and the Medes and the Persian kings attacked it under Darius, and Cyrus, or Darius and Cyrus, general, the king, right? If you remember what happened, and Cyrus was the person that the prophet, if you put the Bible Cyrus, you see his name come up on one of the prophets that he predicted he was going to literally take out Babylon. Now, if you remember what happened was that trouble was about to go at hand. There was an abominable thing that was done by the king Belteshazzar of Babylon. And the moment he did this, Babylon came to an end. Because what he did, he got drunk with the wine of Babylon. You get the point. Revelation 17:16, Revelation 17:18. So anyhow, so he got drunk and he decided to go into the storehouse that his uncle had set up with all the treasures from the temple of God that was in Israel. And he went into there and he got the cups that were used for worship. And he drank out of them, which was a defiance and a disrespect that he knew it was an intelligent move he was making. It was purposely dissing the God of Israel. And the moment he did this, the handwriting came on the wall. They called for Daniel. Daniel interpreted, meaning you farcing, your kingdom is done, is waiting the balance of wanted. If you understand that narrative, basically, while all this was going on, and he was busy trying to disrespect the God of heaven, doing what he knew he ought not to do, bam comes Cyrus and Darius. They empty out that thing, dry up the water, attack the city, destroy it. They were already done that night with a disrespect. That's significant because we know what's coming is that ultimately the prophecy says that America will overturn its constitution. That would be in defiance against God, because remember, the constitution states these are unalienable rights given by God. By overturning, they're saying we're going to take away those rights in defiance of God. And this is why I've been having these discussions with you as to think about it when Americans say the asylum seekers or the people who are terrorists, or all these people doesn't have any constitutional rights. They're basically saying the rights that God gives them, we as Americans willing to take it away. So we know that we're getting closer to the end because America is in a place where a plurality of America believes that these rights are not God-given. They are given by us. That's hubris, that's pride. And this is what Belshazzar did. He basically defied God. And that night, the Bible says he died. And the Bible didn't talk not much about it because his refuse, his waste, his garbage. Because again, he knew, and Daniel told him, he said, you know better. Why did you do this? And this is significant because remember, with all of this I'm saying to you, we have right there at the cabinet with the president, a Seventh Adventist, who ought to tell the president, no, you can't do that. You're defying God. You're taking away the rights that God gave. You don't give those rights. You only can acknowledge them or reject them and suffer and make the American people suffer the consequence of that. But anyhow, so it'd be like many of the issues we have. You could say, oh, it's a civil right to do this and do that, but you have to make sure, check with God. Because if God does not approve of it, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, civil rights or not. God has to be consulted on that. So anyhow, so when you think about that, this is where it becomes significant because they were defying God, and as they were defying God, the kings of the East came and put a hand to the show. Because what next is persecution. Because the moment they defy God, Daniel would have been in trouble. Daniel would have been killed because they basically defy God. And then you notice they went to defy the Jewish God. You see, the God that Nebuchadnezzar converted to. So they specifically went for the Jewish sacrificial systems vessels. So next, who you think would be persecuted? It would be the Jews. And God already stepped in way before. And remember that God stepped in before. And Daniel himself was in the Medes and the Persian area before all of this happened. Danny already knew. He had prayed and said, "Oh, time is up." The prophecy says this is done. So we see the noise coming out saying that we don't have to respect the Constitution for people, human beings, only if they're Americans. This is a slippery slope, and we know where this slope is going to end. Basically, no Constitution and taking away the right that God has given human beings. We know it ended in civil war before, but here's the article. So I can keep going. Notice here in this significant piece here. This is a little quick hit. This is entitled "North Korea Upgrades Nuclear Facility Despite Trump-Kim Summit, Satellite Images Show." And this is written by Kim Helmgard. North Korea continues to upgrade a major nuclear research facility despite President Donald Trump's claim that leader Kim Jong-un has vowed to disarm, according to new satellite images and research paper published by a North Korea monitoring group. Expert at 38 North, that's their name, 38 North, a Baltimore-based website devoted to analysis of North Korea, concluded the images show that improvements to the infrastructure at North Korea's Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center are continuing at a rapid pace. The satellite images are from June 21st. That's less than 2 weeks after Trump boasted of a diplomatic breakthrough with Pyongyang over its nuclear weapons program after decades of hostility. Trump and Kim signed a joint declaration at a summit in Singapore, June 12. So notice these images were just taken days after, a little bit over a week after, and pledged to work towards peace and denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. "We are ready," quote, "to write a new chapter between our nation," Trump said at a news conference following the summit. He called his meeting with Kim honest, direct, and productive. The improvement to the Yongbyon facility included modifications to a plutonium production reactors, core cooling system, and various support facilities. Uranium enrichment, a key component for civil nuclear power generation and military nuclear weapons, is still taking place, according to 38 North's interpretation of the images. There was no immediate reaction from the White House to 38 North's analysis, and the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center is located about 60 miles north of the country's capital in Pyongyang and is a core part of its nuclear weapons program. Still, the monitoring group conceded in its research paper that the ongoing improvements to Yongbyon facility should not necessarily be seen as having any direct relationship to North Korea's recent pledge of denuclearize. North Korea's cadre can be expected to proceed with business as usual until specific orders are issued from Pyongyang, the author report. In an apparent sign of goodwill before the Trump summit, North Korea in May claimed it demolished a separate nuclear test site at Punggye-ri, which sits at a sparsely populated mountainous region in the country's northeast. But the Singapore summit has been criticized for being light on detail of any policy change or producing only an intention to denuclearize. It did not produce anything on how to get it done. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said the U.S. will regularly assess Pyongyang's seriousness towards abandoning its nuclear weapon program, but has not committed to a timeline or roadmap. Quote, "North Korea is not obliged to any specific action as of yet, but these images certainly underscore the importance of continuing negotiations and getting a detailed agreement in place to freeze North Korea's nuclear program," says Jenny Town, managing editor at 38 North, in an email comment, this is true. This is the true test of Trump's administration to now see if they have the will and ability to do the hard work needed to move past lofty goals to practical and unsustainable solutions. So, first thought there that is significant. I remember the nuclear reactor that was destroyed at Punji. Um, it was claimed way before probably weeks before the destruction of it, that there was an accident and it was damaged, and then they went ahead and just wreck it altogether, as I remember happening. So this seemed in my mind as a goodwill. Now this is significant, most naturally, because this is from the nuclear front. Now one of the concerns that are going on is this concern that there is how would I call this now, that there is this active concept here of somebody want to physically, there's a group of people out east that want to physically attack the United States. This is ongoing, and this is significant. So that's from that front. That's just the latest. I'm not going to go into all of that because you're probably well familiar with the talk of nuclear war with North Korea, or North Korea wiping off certain places off the map. All right. So if you look at that, that has not changed, and that's always going to be significant to watch, because they're not the only nuclear power out east. We know India, Pakistan, China, Russia, North Korea. All right. So significant. And so I put that to say, because somebody could say, well, that's war is not on the table anymore, especially anything to do with nuclear war. I don't believe that for one bit, especially because when I study the Bible, this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse, because that's just how things work. Significant fact of the matter also. And remember, one of the countries that we have a problem with when it comes down to nuclear is specifically Iran. Because somebody could say, well, Lord, but in the Old Testament, it was not all the way east. It was just next door, tied out to the east. Then they say, well, that country would be Iran. Well, look at what's going on right now. American primary enemy. Just 2 days ago, the Supreme Court upheld the Muslim ban. But it wasn't a Muslim ban in the sense of countries that have significant Muslim population. Because they didn't ban Saudi Arabia, they didn't ban Egypt, they didn't ban Turkey, they didn't ban Indonesia. They banned countries that they think could be hostile against the United States and fighting against the interests of the United States. And the primary country is Iran. But they banned, and any country allied with Iran, like Yemen and stuff like that. So there is a concern of what's going on in that area, Middle East and the eastern part of the world. That's that. The other thing I would say that to me is significant also, if you look at what's going on, China has this kind of global Silk Trail, or whatever you call it, plan where they're doing basically, I think it's called a Belt and Road concept, where they're trying to expand their global business reach by lending out of money to build infrastructure, whether it be ports or bridges or roads, to be able to expand west and basically have easier access to market west, so they can dominate the west. So it's important because, as I say, I'm saying this is tiding out of the east. It affects the river where the stuff flows. If you look at their plans that they're putting in place, not only are they, because as a country they say individuals there save more, but they have a centralized government that basically owns many of their industries, and they're becoming more and more economic power, and they're lending and doing infrastructure projects all over the world. And when they do these projects, they lend at high rates. They lend where other banks and other global Western powers won't lend. And then after they lend and they do the project, if the project countries can't pay back, what China do is just take over the project and do like a 99-year lease, take over all the land, or they'll say, well, since you can't pay us back, give us land, give us some of your prime land so we can develop that for ourselves. That's expanding their global reach. That's basically cutting off the financial flow also. And this is why I say this is so significant, because when they go into a market and they conquer the market, that basically is slowly starving America and cutting its empire down to size. Because again, if you go in and not only you lending money to America, but you're lending money to all these countries and you're taking over markets, and now you having these free trade wars that they're going to start, or these tariff wars, because what America is in a deficit when it comes on to trade, because it's buying more than it's selling, and American goods more and more not being produced in America. And if they're produced, and they're low quality. No matter how much people want to say they buy American, they still drive in, America, foreign vehicles, whether it be from the north, Germany, or from out west. And now China's getting involved more and more into car manufacturing and all that. So you know what's going on. So when you take those things into consideration, and you see China making inroads in Macedonia, or one of those M countries, into Sri Lanka, into various different parts of South America, the Caribbean, into America itself here, having more and more bigger footprints when it comes on to businesses, all type of business, not just fast food business, but hardware business, technology business, all these businesses that is doing is becoming more significant. And business is all what it's all about. But if that was the only thing that's happening, what's happening is the West fascination now, where I started earlier. The West fascination with paganism or religion from the East. Now, remember how I started. If you miss where I started, it's important you go back and listen to the first few minutes. Because what happened? Before a person became taken captive mentally or physically, they have to be taken captive mentally. And so you have to become a mental slave. And so it was for Israel. So it is also for the West in our modern time. They're being more and more taken captive by yoga and by yogis, and they're giving up on the Christian religion. And instead of the country and the people doing better, they're becoming more inferior, more messed up. Instead of the country rising to greatness, the country is declining, because they're rejecting a logical, reasonable religion for a religion that is based upon mysticism. It's basically like Greek mythology. The more you learn, the more you have nothing. As a matter of fact, you're decreasing, not increasing, because you're just learning a lot of nothings, nothing that is significant or valuable to life. There's no tangibility to the religion. So this is what's happening, this taking captivity spiritually and financially and even militarily, because of what's going on in the nation. And as that happens, what you find is that the people that is messed up headwise, they're not able to fight in any way, whether morally or business or war-wise or anything. And we're seeing this significant. And we're seeing this massive thing happening before our very eyes. And I'm watching it because I'm watching to see constantly the tidings out of the East, whether it be for war or for business or for the spiritual part, where the tidings out of the East, basically whatever it is not making the West stronger. It's just weakening it. And as it weakens it, then what it is that another group of people is rising. But I believe ultimately, as I say, why this is significant is because the East really have not really experienced that massive gospel explosion. There's all the mega churches over there doing stuff, but where there's a significant reception of the gospel. And I know this will happen because that's how the Lord is. The Lord, I believe, has a great reaping to do in that part of the world. So as the Western world and countries and people reject the gospel and see the gospel as being foolishness, I believe others will take it, embrace it, and get the blessings that the gospel has to offer. Let's pray. We thank you, Lord, again for your love towards us and the blessings of knowing thee, the only true God. I pray that you may bless us and guide us and where even my mindset or my thinking is not right. I pray that you may lead me into the right path of understanding more so that we can see clearer what's happening in our world today, not just here in America, but even all the way into the eastern part of our world. Bless us, we pray, and may your grace go with us for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Always remember you can leave a comment if you have a thought to share. And may you continue to walk with the King. God bless.